I'm Kalpana Fitzpatrick. Welcome to the New Business Ideas Breakfast Club. Today I have with me Roger Peverelli from VODW, JP from Salesforce.com, and Andrew Fisher, CEO of Towry. Today we're going to be discussing new business ideas in terms of how fund managers can get closer to the end investor. Thank you guys for joining me today. It seems, the way fund managers communicate or have a lack of communication with the end user, the way we, the whole economic landscape has changed. I was just wondering, Andrew, do you feel that there's, what's the one thing that you feel asset managers can do more to help you sell their products to your clients?
Okay, I suppose the one thing I'd like the fund managers to do is not to help me sell their products to my clients, because I don't sell any products at all. I give clients financial advice, and the fund management industry supplies components. So the most important thing from a component manufacturer is that it works, and when I want it, it's there. I prefer them to spend a lot more time on getting the product right from the point of view of its manufacturing capabilities and then its delivery capabilities for me, and then I can choose how I put those various components together in order to give the clients the service that they require.
Sure. So really you just want the fund manager to stay out, really?
Yes, that's right.
Sure.
Yep.
Do you feel that they're staying out, or are they actually trying to get closer to the the end investor?
I think obviously some investment management companies go direct, and in that instance I think that there are very few clients who really understand the consequences of buying different types of investment management products, and so they probably shouldn't be doing that because it's not necessarily in the interest of the client. Most of them try, and as they tend not to focus too heavily on the modern techniques of marketing, they get it wrong anyway.
Sure.
So fortunately it doesn't make too much impact on the marketplace, but it's more of an irritant than anything.
Sure. Roger, with your background, you've had a lot of access to case studies. Do you feel there's anything from your case studies that really stands out that can be translated to the larger asset managers in terms of helping get closer to this end investor?
Well, first let me react to what just being put on the table. I think that any component manufacturer should know how to strike the right chord and to create things that are both relevant as well as distinguishing, and actually across the value chain. So what they should do is take the end consumer in mind and know exactly what to do there, but also do the same for relationship managers and for firms like yours. And well, actually the only way to create something that is profitable for all parties is to create that relevance, and that's something that you should put much more into place. Well, you asked me about the best practice.
Yep.
I think that today on a FundForum, Greg Davis of Barclays Wealth Management, he will tell us something about what he is doing at Barclays with behavioral finance, and I think that's great stuff. Just knowing exactly how consumers or how private investors invest, and get behind that better, and see how you can use that to even equip financial advisors even better than now today. So I think there's room for improvement there.
Sure. So you feel that fund managers should maybe get a bit more involved, or?
Well, there's so absolutely, but they should not only focus on the end consumer, although they hardly do today. They should really focus on all the aspects of the value chain.
Sure.
And that's the only way that you can really create something that is a win-win proposition for all the parties involved.
Sure. JP, with your sort of background in the financial industry, just wondering if there's anything you feel that fund managers can do in terms of changing their distribution model, so that they can meet today's consumer needs, and behaviours change, the way the preferences have changed in terms of communication, a bit more social media, for example. Just wondering, what you feel that how distribution models can change.
Okay,
and also if you agree with what these guys are saying, should fund managers just stay out of the picture when it comes to communicating with the end investor?
I think that if I pick up on Andrew's theme, rather than just say the fund manager should get out of the way, what we're seeing is most industries are reshaping from vertical integration and suites to much more of ecosystems of small pieces loosely joined. And if you want federation or the right kind of relationships between small pieces loosely joined, then each piece needs to respect the ability and capability of the other pieces. So I think what Andrew was hinting to us was saying, you do your bit and I'll do mine, because there's almost like a standard and a protocol and a relationship between pieces. Okay? When you take up, where that was going with what Roger was saying, scale being something that led to vertical integration is not something that's sustainable anymore because the customer has escaped. Okay, now firms have to go to where the customer is, and there are 500 odd million reasons why the customer is somewhere called Facebook. Right? I doubt whether there will be many fund managers today who would be able to tell me what their Facebook Connect strategy was.
Right.
Okay. In fact,
they're on it.
Sorry?
If they're already on it.
Yeah. The chances are that they, sort of think, why would a site for kids, which just happens to have a median age and gender for new entrants of 56-year-old women.
Right.
We think Facebook is for kids. Well, my oldest kid is 25. Right? She's not a kid anymore. So I think the big change that's coming is because the customer has moved, the customer is a new generation, the customer is mobile, the customer is always connected, their behaviors require the different ecosystem participants to think differently, and even the larger fund managers to figure out, what is the best model. Should they be using people like Andrew to say, we can't deal with the complexity of dealing with the edge, therefore we will concentrate on getting quality.
Sure.
Those that decide that they want to go direct are also taking the risk that they're putting their brand right in the middle of social media, because it's not their brand anymore, it's driven much more by the customer. So how, if you go direct to the customer, then be prepared for, especially if you're large, for that customer to act in social media and change what you think.
Sure. So is social media really giving fund managers that opportunity to access the end investor, and is it the right way to do it?
Yes, I think there are already examples. For instance, in the US, there are quite some investor communities where, some 500,000 private investors share their portfolio with other investors. So you can actually see who's performing well, and even sort of mirror your portfolio against the best performing.
I think that, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think that for me is the epitome of what is wrong with our industry. That essentially, what has happened over the last probably couple of 100 years is that there's been a gradual amateurization of investment management, to the point where you have a group of people in Des Moines, Iowa, who are putting together a portfolio with access probably to Google and maybe the Wall Street Journal, and are second guessing the infrastructure of BlackRock, where they manage 2.8 trillion of assets, and thinking that they can do it better.
Yep.
The reason they think they can do it better is because all the way along the chain, there are lots of other people who are just slightly less amateur than they are, but still pretty poor, and they're all punting and picking and doing this. So what's happened is that there's been a complete breakdown in trust, because essentially consumers think they are better stock pickers, fund allocators, portfolio managers than the people who do it professionally. And so from my point of view, the advent of a Facebook revolution where people believe that they can second guess an industry and do it better than them, it is just a sad indictment of our industry.
Sure.
Not surprising.
But there are a couple of pieces there I'd like to pick up on. One, the indictment is caused by the fact that you had an intransparent industry.
Yes, absolutely,
right? The lack of trust was based both on the lack of transparency, as well as the fact that the standard, the quality at which the industry was performing, left some arbitrage opportunity, as it were.
Well, huge. I mean, the level of competence is so poor.
So the customers come in saying, you don't perform well enough, you're a black box as to what you do, the fees I pay you aren't reasonable, therefore I'm going to try it myself because anything is better.
Yeah, it's better to do it yourself for free and screw it up, rather than get some other person who doesn't know how to do it to charge you to screw it up.
Effectively.
I completely agree with you. That's the big danger. People overestimating themselves. That's absolutely absolutely.
No, but there is
the
an
case.
expertise. The difference is that expertise must be inspectable by the population.
Yes.
Yes.
And that has broken down. So,
But,
you know,
but the reason I think it broke down, and I think it broke down a couple of hundred years ago, but it's now become more transparent on that breaking down, is that the distribution, and I don't like the term distribution. I don't distribute somebody else's products. I service clients and I give them advice. But there is a huge distribution channel which is made up largely of brokers, and those brokers spend a lot of their time reading the odd research report and punting stocks. Whereas the people who manage assets professionally with considerable primary research, with access to large quantitative data banks, make very informed professional decisions, and by and large they get them right. I mean, they over 50% of the time they get them right, and that means that they add some value. It's then completely distorted through the distribution that they use, where people are essentially saying, well, don't use that fund, use this fund, because it was the best performing last year, which has got absolutely nothing to do with anything.
Right.
in fact, there's
but I
enough
think
evidence to say that's the worst thing.
It's the worst thing to do, exactly right. Though.
Well, I think that what you're saying is that there's a large difference in quality between brokers, and they are from a bit better than amateuristic to very professional. At the end of the day, the overall image in terms of how consumers reflect and give their trust to advisors, well, is determined by the average. And that's, I think, a major problem.
But I think, again, we use the word advisors. Someone who is selling, distributing somebody else's product is not an advisor.
Yes.
They're a salesperson, they're an investment representative, they are whatever you want to call it, but they're not advising the client. And the idea that one of these brokers, as we call them, is better than another is the nuance of a rounding error on a decimal point. Yeah, they all cannot possibly be as good as the people who have all the data.
If you go back to the trust issue, okay, the fact that performance at the edge, whether you want to call them a broker or a tied agent or whatever else, that
or an
or the
IFA,
advisor, the performance at the edge is now more visible to the customer than it has ever been, because customers are in a position to compare.
Yes, I agree.
Okay?
Transparency is helpful.
Since they're comparing, I would actually work on and believe we're at the dawn of a whole new age because of the connectedness of people. Because one, the garbage is going to be taken out of the system because of the transparency. You can't.
I hope so.
Well, you can't advertise and build brand alone, and they as they say on the internet, nobody sort of knows you're a dog. Used to be the 10-year-old plan. Now it's on the internet. Everybody knows you're a dog as people realize the capacity of the web to propagate information.
I think I agree with you, and I think it'd be marvellous if the world changed that way. I think the problem you have is that there is a huge level of inertia, that people will use the broker that they've used for the last 20 years, despite the fact that he is or she
But that was
is
because
awful.
the industry had very high switching costs.
No. I don't think it's switching costs. I think it's just people trust this person, and
despite his lack of performance.
You would never do it if you suddenly found that you
also
had
in banking, in all range of banking services, financial insurance services. The product can be better, the price can be better, but still people stay with their old supplier, and basically because of inertia.
And not because of trust.
No, there are several factors, but what you see is that there's still a remaining part, which is huge, which can be like 40-50%, even 80 in some categories, that show inertia,
but
regardless of what you do.
There's also the irony of the current situation is we have never had in the world a more prohibitive tax regime, and we've never had higher levels of volatility. So you desperately need now professional advice, more than ever before, and people can't punt their own positions in Iowa in order to build their own portfolios. If they do it, then they will fail and lose money. Probably no more money than they lose if they used any other broker, because they don't do it either. But today there is a huge need for real professionalism at each level of the value chain, which is why I started by saying I'd really like fund managers to focus on doing what they do well, which is manage funds. And not worry about distribution.
But what does the actual investor want? I mean, you just touched upon trust. It was a big issue, but obviously the economic landscape has changed. There is actually a lack of trust. I mean, do people still trust the same advisor now? And is this why there's this slight call for fund managers to get closer to this end investor?
I think that they sadly do still trust their advisors, despite the fact that the advisor has systematically abused them over a long period of time.
Right.
What they want is to retire at a certain age, to put their kids through school,
Yep.
to have a second home, to go on holiday, to pay the food bills, to pay the light bills, and to put food on the table. That's what they want. We as an industry give them different components of a piece of an engine in order to build a car, in order to go on a journey.
Yeah.
And we forget about the journey, the map, the direction, or anything else. We just focus heavily on which transmission they should use, when
Sure.
they probably should use a bicycle.
Sure.
And I think there I agree with that. True advisors should focus on what the end goal is and then work backwards. But this is basically what quite a number of advisors and especially brokers are not doing.
No.
And that leaves a lot of opportunity and a lot of, desire.
But the reason
to
they don't
actually
do
tap
it
into that.
is because they get paid
Yes, of
by
course.
not by the client,
No,
but they
no.
get paid by the manufacturer
So
who,
far.
who pays them
So
a
far.
commission to
Yeah.
flog their product. And
Sure.
I think what I would love
Long
to see, and
incentives.
it certainly is happening in the RDR, although the RDR is the wrong word, it should be the Retail Advice Review, but it's the RDR, the Distribution Review, that will drive this commission bias away. It'll
Yeah.
move to a proper fee basis where a client pays for advice. And then there'll be more of a level playing field, and then people will start assessing whether a manager is good or bad.
Yeah, and I think that also, with the advent of social networks, two other pieces coming into play that's going to really affect the industry. One, the cost of acquiring feedback is very, very low.
Yes, and it's going
Yep.
to be even
So
lower.
at every stage, what you think of the fund managers you work with, or what your customers think of your advice, the cost of picking up that and using it as data in order to help improve services has changed. So being part of that conversation has become a lot more important than
Yes.
it might have been the case before. And I think the second element, which again, shouldn't be forgotten at this stage, is we're moving from an advertisement type world to a recommender type world, which actually works to its advantage to the advice model. Okay, the people now will buy products much more likely on their advice of their friends and associates, their social network.
Regardless of the advice is good or bad,
That's
they
the
will do
problem.
it.
And that's
No,
why.
but that's what I'm asking for both these things to happen at the same time. One, the bad advisor gets shaken out because
Yeah.
of transparency.
Yeah.
Two, the network-based approach to say, I will use the advisor my friends recommend me, will start leading to my being directed towards better advisors.
Yes.
Because both the recommendation model is better than the advertising model, which is very biased towards the owner of the product.
Yes.
And the number of participants in the industry, quality should increase as a result of the transparency.
I think you're
Okay,
right.
I may be
over the next
utopian.
20 years,
Yeah.
it sounds rather sort of utopian, but
Yeah.
over the next 20 years we might get there. I just fear that for the present, where there has never been a greater need for real unbiased advice, there are still so many biases built into the system, and there are so many, I suppose, just complete lack of understanding on the part of the client as to what they can get and what they should get.
Well, actually, that's the third thing I would like to add to your list is increasing the literacy with regard to
yes.
investment
Yeah, I agree
products
entirely.
among consumers, because basically that's where it all starts.
But where do you think that literacy increase is going to come from? Is it the product guy? Is it
It's
the
got to start in the
advisor?
schools.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is actually
We
part
missed
of
a generation. We might as well start
Total
with
lack
anyone.
of
Yes,
education.
You have to start at the age of 6. We've seen some great examples, especially in Scandinavia, where programs are created that are part of the educational system, of
so
the
so
curriculum.
numeracy and
So you-
financial
Financial
prudence.
literacy.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you learn to read, write, do math, but also what is money, what
What's
is it
compound
for?
interest if you borrow?
Exactly. Well,
Can-
that's not at the age of 6, but probably a bit later. But
Can fund managers get involved in, educating consumers at all? I mean, and again, should they, or should they
Well,
just
I think
stay
they
out?
can, and they should, providing they don't then bring some form of bias,
Sure.
sponsorship
Exactly.
bias into it. But I think the industry has a duty to
Yeah.
inform this generation, the new generation coming through, and
Right.
then they can use social media or whatever they want to use about risk, about return, about the devastating impacts of debt.
Yeah.
And how leverage is a terrible thing and works both ways, and
Yeah.
people only see the positive.
Right.
They can do lots of those things,
Sure.
but then leave the idea of the future planning and financial planning to another discipline, which is
Sure.
separate, which is how those pieces
Sure.
are used.
Sure. I mean, you're saying that. I mean, obviously, quite strong and fund managers should stay out of in terms of having this relationship with the actual consumer. is there something, you know, an IFA can do maybe to, you know, what would you say is a, you know, great business idea for you going forward then?
Well, most IFAs, unfortunately, are simply distribution vehicles for fund managers. So they don't advise their clients, they sell them stuff so that they can get commission. I think that there's a new breed of real financial advisor, whether they're independent or not, doesn't really matter. The fact that they are offering true financial advice to clients, paid for by the client, for those clients to achieve the direction of their journey and get to the end goal.
And by definition, not carrying inventory of their own product set.
No, absolutely not. Just basically using third-party components to build a discretionary approach to investment management combined around a financial plan for the person's life.
But wasn't this the way life used to be within the industry, that you had separate capacity? Yes. The broker at the edge was always an advisor, did not carry any inventory, was not tied to a single. So
well, I think he always got paid by a commission though.
Yes,
I think commission's always been there since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Okay. So
and you always had also the problem that if it was a pure broker, he made more money if he churned the portfolio. Yeah. And there's always this conflict.
Okay.
Taking that conflict away, I mean, in our case, what we try and take it away in several ways. One thing we do is we pay our advisors 100% salary.
Yeah.
So they don't have any incentive to do anything, and as a consequence, they do a lot.
So you take the churn out.
Yeah, you take the bias away if you can.
Right. But I think that Towry is, in that case, one of the exceptions rather than...
yeah, unfortunately. Although there's others also do it, and other people are changing.
When you look at the total size of market, I think that this is still an exception. I think this is the way forward, but what you see is that there are still so many parties that are really still paid, driven by the wrong incentives.
Yes.
And actually, customers recognize that. And
yes, they do. Yeah.
Are you guys seeing it all as sort of still a very, you know, is it global connected markets for this yet? You know, is it one Europe even? Do we find?
It's very local.
No, it's very local indeed. Yes.
And is that sustainable?
Oh no, because of the economic crisis, what you see is that people even turn to a smaller scale rather than a larger scale.
Yes.
So the hyper-local is much more active than the hyper-global.
Exactly.
So would you expect to see a separation whereby the guys building product are hyper-global because their scale matters, and the guys providing customer access and advisory are hyper-local because...
Well, certainly we only operate in the UK, and yet we use fund managers from around the world.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether that model, you know, it's not just fund managers do your own thing, but you start seeing that the fund managers are operating at a different scale from the advisors because you're concentrating on two different things.
Yes, you have different
for
markets.
you, high touch and local presence is what matters.
Yeah.
Whereas for the fund manager, consolidation, scale, these things start getting valuable.
Yes.
You still choose between them.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
you might see a consolidation in that industry, whereas
that is
in your
the
industry, they may see just exiting of the weak rather than consolidation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. I mean, you know, what's clear to me is that asset managers, they're right at the bottom of the food chain, and you know, there is desire to sort of maybe move up and still get closer to this end investor. So if if I was to take away one thing from today, what would you say that's that one thing that asset managers should do?
Know more about their customers, the end customers, as well as every stage in the value chain.
Sure.
And add value.
That's what they need to work towards. What about yourself, JP?
I think, again, at every stage of the value chain, people will need to understand that price obscurity is no longer a way of being able to survive. Price transparency is guaranteed because customers will talk to each other.
Sure.
In which case, your trust, your quality of service, what you actually invest and provide in the relationship is going to be the distinguisher, because the product itself, you can't differentiate on price at the edge because your ability to hide that has gone.
Yes, yes. Andrew, I know your answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What's that one new business idea that you've got that you think the industry should pick up on?
I think the one idea is that the consumer is changing, is not going to be duped anymore, is going to seek out advice, and will look at where value is added, and fund managers should work out where they add the value.
Sure. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you all so much for your time on this today.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.